My name's Kevin Dorr, and this session is about our new RM 2.2 product, which was released a couple of months ago. So last year at Summit, I did a 2.1 presentation that sort of went over the base functionality. If you're interested in that, you can look that up online, and it goes over a lot of what the in-place records management does and that type of thing, and especially automation features. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'll give a little bit of an overview of how we got here, and then I'll talk about some of our new features for compliance and linking, as well as some improvements we've made to how you define rules, which is pretty cool, and our new legal hold features, which is also very nice, and some improvements that we've made to the client side of the in-place records. So to go over how we got here, in 2009 we released our Records Management version 1, which was actually written by John Newton, and it was very specifically DOD 5015 compliant and had data structures that were kind of built in that way. So we decided to refactor it so that it was more of a general use product, and we did that in 2012. So we had an initial release that was just sort of the refactoring release, and then last year we released our 2.1 product, which had the in-place records management features. How many people here use records management? Anybody? A couple of people. So do you use the in-place management? Great. So in-place management basically means that if you've got like a document management side of your repository and a records management side, that you can declare records directly from where they are in the document management side. So that was the big deal there. So then, whoops, went the wrong way. So then in 2014, we released RM 2.2, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Next year, we will release RM 2.3, which is the release that will match with Alfresco 5. All of these releases are DOD 5015.2 certified. We got a perpetual certification on the 2.0 release, which means that we are perpetually certified. And then next year, we may try to get classified certification for the Department of Defense. And I don't know how that really works in Europe very well, if that matters to you or not, but we do have a lot of customers within the Department of Defense in the U.S.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
We're filming in the other room.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if I turn that speaker down just a little bit?
Sure.
On that side, because the room's not completely full.
Oh, absolutely.
Apologies.
No worries at all. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to be talking about 2.2 today. So to briefly go over how our records management works, you have a site in Share that you've set up for one of your particular departments. And then records management sort of goes across all of those sites. So when you file a record, it goes into a single site right now, and this may change in the future, but the records management site contains the records for all of the other sites that are in a Alfresco system. So in terms of version compatibility, you need to be pretty careful about what you are using and what you match to, because there are version dependencies on the Share version and the records management version, and that's because there are some interactions between records management and Share. So here's a list. You can reference that later. Just be careful if you're setting up a new install. So let's talk about compliance. So the records management system that we have has a file plan, and then one of the constructs in it is called a category. So categories can contain folders, and categories are also what holds your disposition schedule. So that's how, in general, we have structured our records management product. And so in order to be compliant with the DOD 5015 standard, we've set up the file plan so that it looks pretty much like this. So There's a construct in DOD 15 called a series, which is sort of the top level thing. And we use a category to emulate that. So we only really have two data structures underneath there. So we're able to implement a full 5015 version control system like this. And then really what that means is that we've got the series category and folder stuff set up. In our older versions, it used to be limited just to 3 levels, so there was only category, series, and folder. But that is no longer true. You can now extend the file plan as many levels deep as you want to. And the thing we were running into a lot was that we would find that people were limited by that 5015 restriction, really wanted larger file plans. So the other type of thing we've introduced is what's called a standard file plan, and that removes a lot of these 5015 restrictions. So in that type of situation, you can set up a file plan as many levels deep as you want to. In addition to the file plan, there's some additional metadata that goes on the record when it's declared that's specific to the DOD standard. And that's things like the originator date, publication date, and those are things that are mandatory fields that are required by the DOD standard to be filled in. In addition to that, there's sets of aspects or pieces of metadata that you can attach to a record as well. And these are all mandated by the 5015 standard as well. So all of those things are what goes into our implementation of the 5015 standard. But if you don't care about 5015, then you don't really need to have any of this stuff hanging around. So what we did is we set it up so that you can now select between whether you want 5015 compliance or whether you want another kind of compliance. So we have 2 selections that are out of the box settings now. One is for 5015, the other one, as I said, is standard compliance. You can also custom build your own compliance rules if you want to. I think Roy Weatherall probably talked about that in his session this morning. And so if you want to set up specific compliance rules that are specific to your company, you can also do that as a custom feature. So to select compliance, when you set up a records management site, it will ask you what you want to select, and so you can just pick the setting that you want to there. So what that actually does then is when you put a content object into the records management control, you've got the metadata that was on the original object. It adds some additional metadata on there. And so if you set the 5015 standard, there's some mandatory metadata, as I said, that goes on there. You can also add in these optional aspects if you need additional pieces of metadata for like web data and that type of thing. And then if you want to, you can also add in custom metadata of your own, and I talked about that, I believe, last year or the year before as well. So there's some things where you can define your own aspects, and you can append those as well if you want to. All right, so let's go on to how the file plan has been changed. This is a pretty interesting feature that we have now. So if you have a contract file, let's say, you might want to file that under an employee record in the file plan, but you might also want to file that under a legal folder. So here's a representation of that. So if you have an employee folder, you might file it there, but you might also want to file it in a different place too, and there wasn't a way to do that previously. So the way that we've done that now is that you can link it to a second location within the file plan. So in order to do that, I'm sorry if this is an eye chart for some of the folks in the back there, but you can use these kind of to look things up later as a reference. We've got a link to item now that shows up when you're in the records management section. And when you select that, what you'll see is you'll get a pick list for other folders, and you can link it to any other folder that you have permissions to inside of the file plan. So what that does, here's how what happens under the covers, is initially when you have your content item in your document management system, there's a primary parent. And so the primary parent here is going to be the green arrow. So initially, you just have it under a single folder in the content management system. When you move it to the records management system, or you create a record, the primary parent shifts to a folder that's in the records management system, and then there's a secondary association that's made back to the content management system. So that allows you to still see the view of the content node in the content management system, but now the primary parent that controls things is the records management system. And if you make another link to another folder in RM, then it just makes another association, and that's also a secondary link. So if you have two links inside of the file plan, you might ask, well, if there's two different disposition schedules, how do you guys handle that? Well, what happens is this. So if you have two different disposition schedules, it basically picks the one that is the most restrictive. So it will take the one that it has the longest period, or what, pardon me, is the most restrictive period to select the disposition schedule that it uses. Secondly, we've changed how the unfiled folders work. As you might recall from last year, or if this is new to you, what happens when you file a record, or you say, I want to declare a record in the content management system, is that it puts the record into a special place in the records management file plan called the Unfiled Records folder. So it used to be that all the records would go into this single location. So that single location was a very important place, but it could be somewhat difficult to manage because it was just one folder. So what we've done now is we've built out a folder structure in there so you can have more finite, more atomic control over records that you want to put rules on or automatically file, basically. So that's what that looks like inside of the records management system. So you can see there's in the whole directory there, now you can put a folder in there. And the folder can have several different operations on it there. So you can manage permissions on a particular folder if you need to do that type of thing. And you can also get its own audit log as well as setting up its own rules there. So that allows you to have different records managers that control different records for different parts of the company, just work on a single place in the unfiled records. And if you have a large list of unfiled records that go into the top level folder, then you can put rules there to file them into one of the subrecords. So this goes over sort of just what I just said there, which is that the different folders can have different filing rules. So in speaking of rules, we've put some improvements into how the rules are built. So this is the standard rule screen that we have that's just set up for all of the different types of rules that you would build into the Unfiled Records folder or into any folder in the records management system. So this is what it looks like when you open up the initial rules page. It shows you a list of what the rules that are there are, and then how the rules are set up if you click on one of them. So the new thing that we've put in, first of all, you select what the condition is that causes the rule to trip, and then you can select what rule you want to have fired, so that part is the same. But now if you select a file tool or move to rule, it will show you a display that you can interactively select where the rule is going, or where the file would go to inside of the file plan. And this is really a pretty cool feature now. With the 2.1 release, we put in what was called dynamic filing rules, which means that you can substitute metadata into the file path that you're constructing for the placement inside of the file plan. And it used to be that you had to sort of know how that worked, what the keys that it would be looking for in particular. So now what we've done is we've put in a autocomplete function. So it may be pretty hard to see for a lot of you there. But what I've put in here is date.y, and it gives you a drop-down list to pick from of different choices and it shows you what the choice would be. So if I take long year, it would put in 2014. If I take short year, it would put in 14, that type of thing. So it gives you an indication of what your choices are as well as what it will look like. And in addition, you can also put in multiple substitutions in the file plan now, or into the file path rather. So that's also a new feature. Now, we've also made some new modifications to the legal hold stuff. So if you've got a record that's filed someplace in your file plan, what we used to do is we would say there's a function on an option on the menu for the file that would say to freeze the record. And that was very confusing terminology for a lot of people because freeze means something sort of different than what it really did. It actually did freeze the record in the sense that you can't do things to it and the disposition schedules can't run against it. But some people took that to mean something else, that it was being frozen for edit, which is not exactly what that function does. So that would put all of the records that you declared that way into a single hold folder. So you just have this big long list of holds. So what we've done now is we've also put some structure into the hold folder as well. So now you can put additional folders into there, and then you can file a record into one or more of those holds, because you might have a position where one single record that you have might apply to more than one legal case. So that works like this. You've got the hold folder here, so that's what that is showing. And then you can set up different hold folders by adding a new folder into this directory. So that just asks you what the hold is for, what the reason is. It has a little bit of metadata that goes along with it. And then it keeps track of what all the holds are that are active. So when you want to hold a record now, you go to the menu for the particular file, and you say, I want to hold the record. And when you click on that, it now shows you a list of all the files that are in the hold directory, and then you can click on the ones that the file should be held for. If a record is already held in another folder in the hold directory, you can add it to another hold folder, or you can do some other. So here's an indication actually of that it's already being held as a little snowflake. This is what we put there for you. So the options that you have there are you can add it to a hold, or you can also remove it from the hold as an individual file without having to remove the entire hold. In addition, you can also get an audit log for the individual record or for the hold folder. You can also set up a hold directly from a search now, which you weren't able to do previously, so that there's a button there on that interface that allows you to add records directly from a search as well. If you have a hold set up, so this is back in the hold directory now, there's some other functions that are available there. So you can edit a hold, so if you want to edit the metadata that you set up when you set up the records, you can do that. You can also remove the entire hold, so if the case goes away, you can just get rid of the hold and it releases all the records that were in it. Or you can also get the audit log, as I said, for that particular hold. So if you generate the hold report, you'll be asked to either set up a location to store the report for the hold, or you can put it into the unfiled records folder, which is what's being shown here. And the hold report looks something like this. So it shows you what records are being held in the for the particular hold, some metadata about what the hold is, and then all of the dates that correspond to when things were held and when they were released and that type of thing. So once again, under the covers, we've got a bunch of pointers, and we just add some additional pointers for the holds. But those additional pointers are special because they suspend the execution of the disposition schedule until the hold is lifted. So that gives you the ability to control security on holds and do all the other things that we have for folders on the hold folders. And then you can also get reports about what the holds are. Now, on the client side, we've made some pretty interesting improvements. So if you go to the in-place records management, so this is actually a view of a site, the human resources site that's on the client side of the content management system. You can see that there's a file there that has a bunch of icons down the side, and the icons are meaningful. So the first one there says that that's been declared previously as a record, so it's under the control of the records management system. And this one shows you that it's under a legal hold. Some of the other ones there show you that it's a vital record. So if you know how to read those icons, you can get some information out of it without having to drill into things. But if you go into the detail page, you can see, and I'll have to apologize, my system was acting up at this point, so I didn't get a preview like I should have. So there's the normal metadata properties that you would get on the content management system. But if you go scrolling down, the cool part of this is that you can see and once again, this is in the content management side, not the document management or the records management side of the repository. You can see some things about how the record is stored without having to actually go into the records management system. So previously what used to happen with the in-place records management is if you clicked onto the detail, it would actually move the location of your current context into the middle of the records management system. So that wasn't really a real desirable thing because people weren't really oriented to what was happening there. So now it doesn't move you, it keeps you right where you are, but it does show you some things about how the records are set up. So it'll give you some of the metadata about the record. It'll also show you if there's a vital record indicator, what the indicator is. And the really cool thing, I think, is that it shows you what the disposition schedules are if there's multiple disposition schedules that are attached to it. It'll show you what the actual disposition of the record is at the current time, what schedules are running against it, and what might happen to it in the future. And if you've also linked the record, so if you can make references to records too, so you can say that this record is a cross-reference of another record, or it is a different version of a previous record, it replaces a record, that type of thing. You can also see that here. And you can also edit those from here as well, so you can set up new associations or references from the client side. So that was pretty much all I had to talk about today. I'll have to apologize that that went quite a bit faster than I was thinking it would. Anybody have any questions about what's on our roadmap or anything like that? All right, there's a question. Sure. There is a plan to do that. Now, I'm not sure what the priority of any of that stuff is. We do have a plan to archive different groups of folders. That's a requirement for a lot of different situations, including software archiving and that type of stuff. So I believe the plan is that we'd zip those records together and then archive them as a group. And I know that's on the roadmap, but I don't know when they're going to get to that. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there another question? you can, so what you can do with a workflow, and I went over this last year in the other talk that I gave, is you can run a workflow so that the end result of the workflow is that it files a record into the records management system. Or you can pretty much, with activity, you can do any of the other functions that you can do with Alfresco. So if you want to link records, if you want to postpend any of that type of stuff, you can do that with a workflow, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you for coming.